I also want to thank Ann, the love of my life. She would have been a wonderful First Lady. She has been that and more to me, to our family, and to the many people that she has touched with her compassion and with her care. I thank my sons for their tireless work on behalf of the campaign, and I thank their wives and their children for taking up the slack as their husbands and dads spend so many weeks away from home. I also want to thank Matt Rhodes and the dedicated campaign team that he led. They have made an extraordinary effort, not just for me, but also for the country that we all love. And to you here tonight, and to the team across the country, the volunteers, the fundraisers, the donors, the surrogates, I don't believe that there's ever been an effort in our party that can compare with what you have done over the past years. Thank you all so very much. Thanks for all the hours of the work, for the calls, for the speeches, for their appearances, for the resources, and for the prayers. You gave deeply from yourselves, and you have performed magnificently. And you have inspired us. You have humbled us. You've been the very best that we could ever have imagined. The nation, as you know, is at a critical point. At a time like this, we can't risk partisan bickering and political posturing. Our leaders have to reach across the aisle to do the people's work. And we citizens also have to rise to the occasion. We look to our teachers, to the professors. We count on you not just to teach, but to inspire our children with a passion for learning and discovery. We look to our pastors, our priests, our rabbis, and our counselors of all kinds to testify of the enduring principles upon which this society is built: honesty, charity, integrity, and family. We look to parents for the final analysis. Everything depends on the success of our homes. We look to job creators of all kinds. We're counting on you to invest, to hire, to step forward. And we look to the Democrats and the Republicans in government at all levels to put the people before the politics. I believe in America. I believe in the people of America. And I ran for the office because I'm concerned about America. This election is over, but our principles endure. I believe that the principles upon which this nation was founded are the only sure guide to a resurgent economy and a renewed greatness. Like so many of you, Paul and I have left everything on the field. We have given all to this campaign. I so wish that I have been able to fulfill your hopes to lead this country in a different direction. But the nation chose another leader. And so Ann and I join with you earnestly to pray for him and for this great nation. Thank you, and God bless America. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't necessarily endorse the entire message or the concession speech, but the message that he is putting out in this speech is kind of what I'd like to focus on. He began his speech by wishing President Obama and his family well. He wished them well. He ended the speech by saying that he joins us in praying for President Obama. After the election, I was driving to school, and I didn't know who had won the election at the time. But as I was driving to the school, I heard on the radio, Bill Bennett's Morning in America. I have about a 3-mile drive, so I hear about 34 seconds of radio in between commercials on my drive to work. But one of the things I listen to is Bill Bennett's Morning in America. Sometimes you get a couple tidbits of information. It's basically a conservative talk show radio program. And the host had a psychologist on the program the morning after the election. The whole purpose of this particular segment, again in the 34 seconds that I listened, was how do people get over the depression of the election? They were depressed. There was a guy on there who was talking, he's not getting out of bed for the next 4 years because of the election. Now, I laughed even more because before I left the house, every morning I tell Lori goodbye and I look in on the boys, and usually Mason's right next to Lori because he's in our bed. But I told her goodbye. I didn't know who had won. And she said, I'm not getting out of bed for the next 4 years. Joking around. I said, why? Did Obama win? And immediately Mason popped up, Obama won? Ever since then, probably 2, 3, 4 times a day, Mason, just out of the blue, will stand up and say, Obama stinks. Of course, we try to teach him, and that's part of the message today, but I don't know where he got it, but he continues to do it. Obama stinks. Now, certainly Lori was joking with her comment. As for Mason's comment, I'm not sure. I don't always know where the kid comes from. But it's probably apparent to most of us that Obama hasn't been the best president for our country over the past 4 years. We may disagree with his politics. We may disagree with the manner in which he conducts himself. But we must remember that God placed him in office in 2008, and God placed him back in office in 2012. Although we do hold an election every 4 years to determine who our leader will be, we really don't have a choice. Not that we vote, but people in general, the citizens of this country, nor does the Electoral College. God decides who the leader of our nation will be, as well as the leaders of every other nation in the world. We know as a church that we don't participate in the voting process. There's a statement in the church doctrinal paper on voting, and it says this about politics. It says, politics is the unpleasant and ungodly wrangling over issues, as well as the vying for personal advancement. Now, I don't believe that really any of us would probably disagree that our current political system is filled with ungodly wrangling over issues. Governor Romney in his concession speech encouraged the elected officials to stop the partisan bickering. He encouraged them to stop the political posturing. We understand that we are not citizens of this world. We live in this world, but we're not citizens of it. We are citizens of heaven. We're to live in this world, but not be part of it. In 1 Peter 2, we get a little indication of what that means. 1 Peter 2, verses 11 through, I wrote 12, but it's 17. 11 through 17. It starts out in 1 Peter 2 by saying, "Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. Submit yourself for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to the governors who have been sent by him to punish those who do wrong." In verse 15, "For it is God's will that by doing good for it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people." By doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. "Live as free people, but do not use your freedom to cover up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor." We may not know why God chose President Obama for another 4 years. We don't know. But what we can be assured is that His will was done. We can also be assured that He has a plan for us now, and certainly a plan for us in the future. The Bible affirms in many, many verses, the doctrinal paper on voting has lists and lists of verses in the Bible that affirm that God is the one who chooses our leaders. Just one example is Romans 13, verse 1. Beginning in verse 1, Romans 13. Here it says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment upon themselves. President Obama will probably not go down in the history books as being the greatest president that we've seen in our country. He probably won't even debate that. He may not have great approval rating in the polls. You certainly may not agree with the way he conducts himself personally. Certainly, he conducts himself in many times contrary to God's laws. But he is the leader that God has chosen for us, and therefore we are to submit to his leadership and his authority. With one exception. Acts 5:29 gives us the one exception. Acts 5:29 tells us when we should not submit to the authority that God has put in place. And certainly we all know what that authority is, or what that omission is. Acts 5:29, Peter and the apostles replied, "We must obey God rather than human beings." Now that's just a snippet out of a long long piece of scripture that's there, but basically they were being asked to disobey God. Peter and the apostles were being asked to disobey God's laws. So this is taken out of that where it says we are to obey God rather than the authority of man. So if we are asked to do something that's in contrary to God's law by a leader, by an authority figure, we always choose God's laws over the laws of man. We read in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, again, you don't have to turn there, we did already, but we read that we are to live good lives. We are to do good deeds. And if we do this, we will silence the ignorant talk of the foolish people. I don't think we're going to disagree that our elected officials, probably more times than not, we don't agree with them. We probably disagree with our leaders more times than we agree with them. You don't have to listen to the talk radio shows, whether it's a conservative radio station or a more liberal radio station. You don't have to listen too long to hear the ignorant talk of elected officials, or anybody for that matter. Certainly many of our elected officials could be classified as fools. However, walking around saying, Obama stinks, or staying in bed for the next 4 years, probably is not the behavior that God expects of us. We are to be a light to the world. We're to do good deeds. We're to conduct ourselves within the confines of God's laws. This means respecting and following authority, even though we may not agree with it. I wish the parents would subscribe to that. In some cases, I'm the authority, and they don't agree with me a lot of times. It always amazes me how personal people take the election, how personal people take politics, how bent out of shape and distraught they get over the leaders and who wins, who loses. I mean, the people on this show, they were nuts. I mean, literally, they were depressed and didn't want to get out of bed for 4 years. It boggles my mind. Brethren, I'm very, very thankful. So very thankful that I've been blessed with the understanding that God's in charge. God has a plan, and that God chooses the leaders to fulfill not our purpose, but His. We know we are ambassadors for Christ, and our main job as an ambassador is to show the lifestyle and speak for the government that we represent. We know this is not our government. We know that our citizenship is in heaven. Our true government is a government of God. Governor Romney did not speak ill of the president in his concession speech. He said he would pray for the president. He said he'd pray for his family. He said he would pray for our nation. He asked that we set aside the political posturing, the bickering, so that we can do what's right for our nation. He said that our nation was built on honesty, charity, integrity, and family. Now, I'm not an expert on Romney's character. I don't know what his true character is. I'm just saying that in this particular speech, he demonstrated some of the behaviors that we should show. We are to submit to the authority of man. We are not to submit to the authority of man if it's contrary to God's laws. But if they're not, God tells us that we should submit to authority. God reminded us in 1 Peter that we are to do good deeds. We are to live a good life. And in so doing, we will silence the ignorant talk of the foolish. Brethren, there's so many fools that need to be silenced. Let us do our part in making this happen by living by God's laws and acting as ambassadors for Christ.